Well, Michael, thank you for joining today, man. I appreciate it. I asked you to come on today because on a personal level, we do business together in full disclosure, but also since I've met you, I've valued your practical, insightful approach to the world and your kind of get shit done approach to the world. And I think it's really refreshing. If that is a technical term I'm allowed to use.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you and I are alike on that, Henry. So yes.
Well, but if you wouldn't mind, just for our audience, a little bit about exactly what you do today, and a little bit about your career.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. It's being in this world of financial mortgage banking has been, a blessing and a curse. Um, Once you're in it, you can't get out. Just the fact that there's so many avenues, so many ways of affecting so many lives of what we do. And we forget that that's our core responsibility is taking care of, people's lives and their families and their mortgage needs and their, trying to get them into that right house at that right time based upon their specific timelines. And I've had a wonderful opportunity to, be with Leader One, be 20 years in August.
Wow.
uh, Serving, and I look at it as, not a job, but I look at it as serving as a technology advisor, technology advisor for our board of directors, for our employees, and helping create an ecosystem, a technology ecosystem that allows our wonderful employees to make the best possible impact to our customers that we can. And it's challenging. It's definitely challenging in today's world. We saw that in 2008, with the crisis, and we saw that in COVID. We're seeing that now with the automated intelligence, just pushing the envelope of everyday tasks that we, considered mundane, and, trying to get our ecosystem and our tech stack and all of our employees, both here at Leader One and, across the industry at all the financial institutions, to embrace, what's coming. And it's been a challenge for sure. We as humans, we like change, but I think the change is happening so quickly. It's having a hard impact on a lot of folks. And my job is to not only stay in front of the technology, stay in front of protecting our customers' data and our employees' data, but also kind of stepping back and allowing them to digest of what's happening. Because it's the momentum is so quickly, as you know, Henry, it's inundating, and a lot of people can't keep up with these changes because they're siloed. They're seeing, this is my task, and they're just seeing more and more things added into their day to day, and it's overwhelming for a lot of folks. And so we're trying, both at Leader One and as an industry, to consolidate, try to drive that technology perspective so it's efficiently, for both internally, and the consumers still have that control of, how they're navigating their journeys. So.
I want to ask you a question about your unique role in the company at Leader One. I think that you play a lot of different roles beyond just technical advisor. It seems you have a leadership responsibility, a governance responsibility. It seems like operational responsibility. Tell us a little bit about how did you create this role for yourself, or were you asked to take on these responsibilities over time?
Well, I'll give you the official titles. So, Chief Information Officer, Chief Information Security Officer, and Executive Vice President, and firefighter. Right at the end. You know as well as I do. That's what we do. Um, Being in an IMB, large or small, everybody wears multiple hats. And I've had the privilege of being with this organization for this long, and so I've done everything. I've ran secondary, I've done operations, I've done compliance. The only thing I haven't done is accounting. I'll leave that to the smarter people. But you, I've definitely worn a lot of hats, and it's given me a lot of insight. And plus, I started in the industry as an originator. You know, back in the day where we could close a loan in 3 or 4 or 5 days, I had the same processor. She was my same underwriter. She was my same closer. She was my same funder in everything. And we were using Calyx at the point, so it was very simple, to do that. Um, but it's allowed me to step back, and remember my days as an originator of walking through that experience, how the customer feels, what works, what doesn't work, how to improve things. And so, as I'm, strategically looking at the ecosystem and, what that landscape looks down the road, I've got a very well-rounded perspective of how I think the business needs to run. That's predicated on, the GSEs and, the stock market and, margin compression, all of those things, and the nice thing about where I sit is we're still very nimble. We can pivot very quickly, make decisions pretty quickly, and we really rely on feedback from our different departments, and that's a huge value for us is to get that feedback, get everybody's buy-in, so that if we need to make changes on the fly, one, everybody has a say, everybody has a buy-in, and then we go and execute. So I've got an amazing job. I've got an amazing company. The folks that report into me are just amazing quality individuals. Um, One thing about our organization, the tenure is creeping up on 12 to 13 years now.
Wow.
So we've got a lot of people and a lot of seats in the senior, the VP, SVP, manager level that have been with us a long time, and it's amazing. So yeah,
So given the tenure you've had with your team, and you kind of came into this industry really right before the crisis, it sounds like.
yeah,
Um,
right before I can remember Thanksgiving Day, the warehouse, we got the call in the warehouses, and they're like, warehouse lines are shutting down. And so Henry, we physically got a whiteboard out. And we wrote every single customer, every transaction that we had in the pipeline. Now, again, this was less than 100 loans back
right,
in those days. We were very
right.
small. But for us, our first was, okay, what part of that month? Okay, all the FHA loans can be, done at the end of the month, so we don't have to worry about those. Then we had crisis management of the moving van or moving truck is in the driveway. We've got to get this thing closed. And so we were just whiteboarding everything out, keeping track of total loan amounts because we were capped at the warehouse lines. And we were just, that was the most hectic Thanksgiving, I can remember. But we made it through it. We sat in the conference room. We didn't have Teams, we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have everybody had their mobile phones, and we were talking to the loan officers, we were talking to the different branches, we were talking to the title companies, and we were moving things fax machine back then. It really, looking back, we don't realize how good we have it today.
So I want to
Versus
ask you about that. In all honesty, how much? This is a question we ask of everybody that's come on the show. How much have things really changed over the last 20 years? And in terms of how a mortgage company needs to operate to be successful versus back then. So as you look at all the conferences you go to and all the themes that have emerged year over year, do you have a point of view on, what's changed the most from your perspective about this business compared to when you got into it?
if you look over 20 years, and that's just kind of my, lifespan of 20, 25 years, the core of the business really hasn't changed. I mean, it's still intake, process, underwrite, and fulfillment on the back end. That is pretty much the same. You still have all the different widgets and the vendors in the aspect of it. The things that have really changed is the sophistication of the borrowers, which is
Interesting.
great. The speed of which we can get the data, process the data, the speed and accuracy that we can transmit the data via, the secure delivery to the warehouse lines, to the title and escrow, um, the efficiencies that we can communicate with all parties involved with the transaction real time. Back then, it wasn't. I remember as an originator, we were always getting a call by the listing agent wanting to know what was going on with the file. And finally, we incorporated all of those folks in, real-time CRM systems, real-time milestone analysis where we can communicate very quickly. Uh, so overall, it's still a core function. Are there pieces that have improved both in the workflow and the efficiency and the communication? Absolutely. I would even go step one for it's more clunkier now because you have all of these vendors coming into the market space trying to solve not the entire fulfillment process. They're very good at X, but we need the full gambit of workflow. And so now you've got, in my opinion, you've got even more clunkiness in the workflow because you've got all of these business partners that you've integrated into your core LOS, and it doesn't matter what LOS you have. You've got all of these integrations going on, and now you've had to increase your sophistication behind the scenes from a development team, from a SaaS team, understanding what's going on so that you can teach and train and diagnose of things coming through. Um, I may not be popular if I say this, but this is how I believe. COVID changed the way we do business from a speed of data, especially with the GSEs, HUD, is they allowed that e-signature piece. I mean, if you go back and look at all of the wet signatures that we still had to do, even though the technology was available, the state precedent wasn't there of trying to get this stuff delivered. The note, the mortgage, yeah, we still have to do a lot of that, but it's slowly coming around because as we get more advanced, we have more systems through e-delivery, we have more e-fulfillment through like a SnapDocs or things like that. There's becoming more and more legal precedents for the e-signature system. Then you've got the POS systems that have fully jumped on board with all of that. And that's where that consumer experience really comes into play of, hey, I can do everything real time. I don't have to be at my work anymore. I can be on vacation. I can be with, wherever in the country to take care of all of this stuff, to get a loan application, to see what's going on with it, to communicate, with the business partners, with my partners that I'm dealing with on the transaction. So good and bad. Now, there's still a lot of clunkiness in legislation because the states and our legislation and the law haven't caught up to speed with what we're dealing with on today's basis. You know, Congress is moving as quickly as it can. CFPB, then all the state legislation are moving. So that's still where we need a lot of advocacy by talking with these folks and getting them up to speed with this. The other piece that has really changed for the worse is all of the fraud, all of the digital fraud that we have seen over the last 20 years. All the bad actors. Remember the day where they were faking all the appraisals for the asset, for the cash out and all of that stuff. Certain counties had to shut down. They wouldn't accept any business. And now we're seeing that with all the fraud coming in with AI, pretending them to be humans, in the transaction, and it's very sophisticated. And it is, almost a full-time job just trying to figure out these types of documents, especially if you don't have them integrated within your system. If you don't have big data integrated, then you're manually looking at these documents and you're talking with your sales team, like, do you know who you're doing business with? Because we're kind of suspecting some very odd things. And we even tested an environment that we got almost halfway through the fulfillment before somebody started asking questions. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what you needed to do. But it got up to about three-quarters of the way through the loan before somebody's like, this doesn't look right. And so I was surprised it went that far. And it goes back to constantly being aware, asking questions, and the training aspect of it. We get so
How do
busy with the
you,
jobs and the processors and underwriters, and they're just, all of this stuff. And that's where I truly believe that AI is going to be that business partner for our core SMEs to really watch this stuff more closely.
and we're gonna, you can't have one of these conversations without going pretty deep on AI and intelligence and automation. I want to pick your brain a little bit about the conversations that you have when you're sitting around with your leadership team and you're thinking about future proofing your business and trying to sort of be relevant to loan officers, relevant to consumers, keep your brand fashion forward. When you guys sit around and brainstorm, what are the things that are popping into your mind that you look around and you see all the ecosystem of providers, the emerging technologies, the service providers. You probably get feedback from customers as what matters to them. How do you guys sort of prioritize it? Where is it this day? If you had to make a top five list today to be a super relevant, super compelling mortgage company, what is it that are kind of the must-haves, or at least what are you guys thinking are the must-haves?
Yeah, I mean, when you sit around, I think everybody at the table is being bombarded with the next shiny object. The hope of or the promise of oh, this next generation of technology, is going to be so much great for our compliance team. It's going to be great for our operations team. We guarantee of dropping these costs. Y- You know, what I think a lot of organizations do is the most dollars spent trying to acquire the customer, they don't do a very good job of keeping that customer.
Hmm.
So, if you look at all of the cost associated with marketing, branding, you know, targeting those particular customers, all the journeys and the layers that you constantly see out from a CRM system. And then they come in and they do the transaction, they do the mortgage, and you go on, and then you put all that stuff into your CRM, doesn't matter whatever, and you rely on a CRM to constantly update. It is still true today, in my opinion, that the customer on a purchase business will always remember the real estate agent. They don't remember who the loan officer was, 9 times out of 10. Has that improved? Yes. But what is the difference between what the real estate agent did and the loan officer did? That real estate agent was there day one, hand holding that customer through that whole process, riding around in the car, going on the weekends. They developed that relationship for a bond. They knew the families. They did all of that. Then you come in from a loan officer, and this is, me speaking as a loan officer is, yeah, you built a rapport, you did all that, but it was a transaction, and then you were working on your next borrower. And I think when we're sitting around the table is we got to have an ROI and a value of how much does it cost to keep that customer, and by God, you need to keep that customer because they can go anywhere today at any given time and replace you at any given point. And then you have all of that hard-earned time and money that you spent to take care of that customer, and the experience may have been exceptional, but that customer is always going to have so many more choices. So it goes back to, with this technology advancement, is that relationship that you've developed with your customer. I think that is going to be forefront and is going to be so critical of keeping your customer base.
So
Uh,
about keeping a customer base, I had a conversation a couple of conferences ago, and we were talking about what our firm does, which is to try to focus on um, productivity and efficiency. And I made a comment from my Lean Sigma days to a group that he who is the lowest cost producer has all the marbles and has the best opportunity to differentiate customer service. And if you're not the lowest cost producer, you're going to be pretending at that game. And we had a long conversation about what that meant. And what I had said was my experience in manufacturing before I got into lending was the companies that figured out how to operationally be the most efficient, which
yes,
translates into the best quality and the lowest
yes,
cost, could
yes,
redirect capital, redirect resources into that great customer experience differentiation. But if you're struggling to pay the bills and it costs you a lot and you're inefficient and your factory's all gummed up, you just don't have the manpower or the capital to do it. And it created a huge argument in the room. And they said, you can be both world class at service differentiation and handholding, and that's more important. That's more important in the mortgage business than being most cost effective. You can, and so there's an interesting tension in the room. Has that changed for you as you talk as you're out in the industry? Is it cost? Is it productivity? Is it efficiency? Is it experience? Is it all of it, or are there trade offs? And where do you guys land in that?
Bottom line, you've got to become efficient, and then the cost will come later. The Southwest CEO back in the day, I'll quote him. He's like, employees, you take care of your employees, they take care of your customers, they take care of your profits. The What I see a lot, when I'm sitting at these conferences is we've got a lot of people and great people, but they are still focused on the old way. This is how we do business, and that's that mindset. Um, where the cost, if you've got a factory line, it's all gummed up or whatever. One, you got to look at a couple things. How many pieces are you trying to get through the assembly line? Um, how many products are you trying to get through the assembly line? And you look back with our industry, just focus on what you're good at. You've got a lot of companies trying to get into different revenue silos to offset some of that ups and downs of variance of cost, when the rates are higher, and then, rely on the purchase and the refi business. If you have a core culture to be as efficient as possible, regardless of, what it looks like, that becomes a variable it's like when you drop a pebble in a pond, it's a ripple effect. And once you focus on that efficiency, then you've got buy-in from all the folks in all levels. That's like, oh, I can fix this to make it even more efficient. And that's one of the things I see happen over and over again is, let's take money and capital, invest in the efficiency, but they haven't solved what they're trying to be efficient at. And then you've got two things. You've got an inefficient system, and then you just hired all of these bodies, and then you put in all this extra capital, and you may have the greatest, point of sale system or a CRM system, but you can't get a loan closed on your service levels, and so you've got a conflict on there as well. And and it's hard today because you've got a lot of margin compression. So, so the companies today, if they are not focused on efficiency, they are going to be left behind and struggling. And so you see a lot of that in the M&A going on right now, especially over the last couple of years. You're seeing a lot of IMBs with one owner, two owner, and they're tired. They're tired. They want to get out of the industry. They want to, sell, their book of business. But a lot of times it's too late. They wait too long to have those open discussions, because it's their legacy. They don't want to give it up. You know, we're trying, we're trying to get as efficient as we can using the tech stack that we have. The LOS and the POS systems, and then building, digital FTEs in the workflow. And that's how I think we're going to become efficient, is in that operational workflow, because that's the core. And you can spread that ripple effect once you imagine and do that. So a lot of companies don't realize that if you're not making change, you're not transforming the business. You're not. Even if you make a single change, that's still transformative, but you've got to continually to look at that workflow to do, the next piece. And people get stuck in today versus looking in 2 years. And it's hard to do with a lot of the ebbs and flows that we're seeing in the industry, but that efficiency has to come with your inner core system, and it'll ripple back out again.
So I'd like to ask you about the intercore system. Some of the guys that we're talking to in and what the purpose for this leadership series is a lot of we're hoping this content's directed at the community banks and credit unions that we're serving in some respects who are coming into mortgage and trying to accelerate and don't have quite as much experience with it. And so the common question they often ask is, uh, it's almost like I'm a startup. I need to have a core operating system or a loan origination system, right? So let me do an RFP, and they ask our opinion about how to manage the RFP. And often we suggest don't do one because what's amazing, I was looking at some data and I'd love your perspective on this. Of the last 50 RFPs that have gone out to public bid, real RFPs where there was actually an open competition,
Okay.
thir 35 of the 50 were won by the same firm in terms of loan origination system. And that same firm that has won 35 out of 50 is the same firm that gets the lowest marks on customer satisfaction and service, and we're not allowed to name names here. So, but it's
Oh,
interesting to
oh,
me.
dang it. I was just like, who you talk? I know who you're talking about. Like,
Yeah. So what's amazing to me is why is it in this industry? Do you have a point of view on this that when new entrants come in and they do an RFP or there's a merger and acquisition and there's a legitimate conversation around let's change, it's usually the same players that still win, still dominate market share, and you hear the same complaints. Well, you know, they're not bringing innovation, they're not bringing this, but they still win all the RFPs. So, how do you explain that from your perspective?
they've got an amazing marketing team for sure. And it's that entry cost, it's that entry barrier to change. A lot of these organizations are going from they had two models. They had a seat count and then they had a PCL, per closed loan. A lot of them have eliminated that seat count, so that helps, driving down that entry point. They extend a 3, 4, 5 year term out there to keep that cost lower. Yeah, What I think, what I think, what I believe is you go from a company that is going from a broker to a banker, you've got a lot of things to look at. If you decide to change an LOS system, go out for a full RFP, you've got a lot of variables that you have to look at. Obviously cost, because it's gonna take a year, to look at a system, get your buy-in, cycle that through, get the new system on in. You got two different databases now that you're running parallel. You have a psychological impact on your employees because they knew this system and now you're putting in another system. So you have a psychological impact, and then you're going to have a decrease in sales volume because everybody's still getting used to using that system. So X person comes in and wins all of these things. Typically they will have a good onboarding team. Typically there's a good entry point from a cost standpoint. And these folks that are winning these bids, it's an all inclusive. Whereas they supply everything. You don't need to go and get all of these third party vendors like we used to back in the day. So they have the LOS, they have the compliance, they have the PPE, they have the web environment. They have all of that delivery that's all built in. Um, and I think what's happening now is they're going to continue to increase their customer service level, at that aspect. But the problem, Henry, and I think you can attest that once you're in that hole, it is hard to dig out. So you go back to those things that I mentioned. You got cost, you got psychological impact. You're running two databases. You got a year to 2 years to figure everything out. So you get that RFP and they win, and they know they got you. I mean, and I'll be the first to admit, I looked at different RFPs out there and I'm like, my God, why? It's a pain point to switch. Can they do all of these things for us? Yes. Do they have a PIA factor? And I won't swear on there, but you know what the PIA factor is? Absolutely. But it's kind of that, that the worst case enemy is like, I know what I have. I'm going to adapt to what I have and hope for the best in the future. So, but that's what it is. It's a full ecosystem. And then, these other folks, you have to plug in a compliance tool, PPE, a dock engine as an example. You have to plug in all of these variables, and these particular vendors that provide that ecosystem, it's easy. It's absolutely easy for them to come in and run.
So they're bringing a more comprehensive portfolio of stuff, and it's sort of hard to contemplate building that stuff on your own.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
think we've gotten to the point where building some of your own native solution is feasible, or are we still in a place where maybe large banking institutions can do that, but IMBs are really buying off the shelf and trying to coordinate?
The big bank box, they have the capital, they have the resources, they've got the departments. Absolutely. Most of their stuff is proprietary anyways, just from all the different revenue vehicles that they have. IMBs are in a tough situation because over the last 4 or 5 years, we've consolidated down to a core FTE group, and we've eliminated all of the nice to haves, and we've had the must haves. So these organizations come in and see that opportunity, and we allow that to do that. Now, over the last year, the IMBs are starting to really allocate and time and capital to AI. Whereas you can have your parent agents, you can have your sub agents, you can create your own agents to make other agents. And so you can put all of these things in the workflow and make sure it's, behind your firewalls and your ecosystem, but you can recreate a lot of that stuff within the AI. Um, do you have to have people that know what they're doing? Absolutely. And there's great third-party vendors out there that do that. But you're starting to see a change in some of the business titles that people have. More of, instead of a processor or underwriter, they're more of a production innovator or somebody that has that operation background but understands the technology and is willing to adopt to that AI or that business intelligence model. And so now you've got a person that has three different verticals that they understand, and you bring that into an ecosystem and you pair that up with a technology and your operations team. Man, that's exciting.
Do you have the people in your geographies where you operate where you think you can recruit the talent required to sort of be that agile innovation type of group, or is it hard to come by where you are?
It if you can define what you're looking for, so if you got to solve the problem, what you're solving for, and then you got to create a job description for that. And I think a lot of organizations are having a hard time justifying and creating a job uh, description for those three SMEs into one. Are there people out there? Yes. I'd rather find somebody that has that digital acumen, that technology, show them the production, bring them in with no preconceived notions of how to do anything, and let them kind of unwind some things and say, why do you do it this way? Why do you do it this way? And bring in some fresh new ideas. Those people are out there, absolutely. And I think a lot of times too, you have people sitting in your own ecosystem and your organization that want to do that. And so you've got to take the time to say, hey, this is the problem that we're solving. I see you processor, I see you underwriter or business development. You kind of understand that piece and you really want to adopt the technology. Come in and talk with us and explore that idea. The other thing too is with all the AI coding, it's a very simple transition piece for them to understand. They can look and pull data, pull this out, pull this workflow, and say, why do we have to do it this way? Um, and I think we're really going to see that bell curve change pretty quickly with those type of people being put in the front row and start making real change.
How do you think about building your teams between in-house employees and maybe outside partnerships or some combination? How do you approach it?
Each, how I approach it really is, you've got transaction and you got volume, profitability. Um, is there a vendor out there that is trying to solve the problem or can solve the problem for you versus, doing a homegrown FTE? What I'm doing internally is I'm taking all of our current folks within our IT ecosystem and rooting and understanding what their capabilities are and what their functionality can be further down the road with some additional training and support within that. Um, Same thing within our operational folks, but these folks are very smart at what they do.
Mhm.
The team that I have, I am very fortunate that they are always asking a lot of questions, looking down the road. They're very in the weeds of what's happening globally, which is great. Sitting in my role, unfortunately it's high level, so I don't get to be down into the granular, and I appreciate all of their feedback. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even think of that. And now they're bringing fresh perspectives. They're creating business continuity. They're building out scope of work and saying, let's try this. And so we put that in the incubator and see what happens on the back end. So I'm very fortunate to work with very talented people, and it's amazing to see their creativity, especially with this AI. It's left brain, right brain, and they are just exploring things left and right because you are sitting, whatever AI system you're asking it questions and getting feedback, and it's constantly providing that feedback of the what if then. And it's amazing to see because I'll get in and look at all the transcripts. One, I'm like, oh my God, why do we have such an expensive tokens? And then I go in and look at all the transcripts and I see what they're doing. I'm like, okay, it's okay. But
They're consuming a lot of prompt time, huh?
yes, yes, and that's the thing that a lot of CFOs may not realize is, okay, we just consolidated. We took the FT count down to here. Here's our GL, but then the IT and operations are full blown in AI, and now the token expense exceeds what I had in FTE cost.
Yeah.
And it's waking people up very, very quickly. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And so now you're
Yeah.
seeing landscape, you're seeing Google, you're seeing Microsoft coming in with new ways of crunching that data, AI data, without using all that token space. But the CFOs need to realize real time that's happening now, and they may not understand that.
I don't think they do, and I don't think they realize that they are pregnant with solutions that they've become dependent on now, and there's nothing they can do about it. I saw yesterday that Meta analyst was saying that Meta, I don't know if they announced it today or not, but they've never sold cloud computing before. They have a
Right.
tremendous amount of capacity that they've built over the years. Well, now they're going to sell it, and they think it could affect their stock price by up to $100 a share.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um, Question for you about scale. We have been in shrink mode across the industry, and I think it did sort of do two things. One, it put some innovation on the back burner a little bit and said, market, catch up and show me what the art of the possible is with AI. I'm not going to do it internally because I'm going to shrink my staff down to functional. Um, and the same on the operational side, right? So I'm just going to have my core processors, underwriters. So everyone that we talk to in IMB land is pretty skinny right now,
Yes.
running pretty
Yeah.
pretty lean. If the market were to come back and scale was a requirement and you had to scale by 35%, 50%, God bless 75%, do you worry about your ability to flex systemically, infrastructure wise right now? Does that keep you up at all?
Not anymore. We've partnered with an amazing organization. I don't know if I can say that out loud, but operationally, leadership across the board, especially sales, they want FTEs, they want bodies. And we've already seen that model is not scalable. It is not a model that is works for anymore, especially when you're driving the cost for efficiency. So last year, yourself and Raj with 3N, we sat down and we mapped out a roadmap, for 2 year window of how this is going to work with digital FTEs in that ecosystem. And when we last talked, there could be close to 150 full-time employees, 24/7, working in that ecosystem side by side with already the condensed workforce that we have at Leader One, and having that ability to scale is not a concern anymore, because we're already in that roadmap of integrating live loans in July. Seeing how the processors and underwriters will work hand in hand with the AI. So now I'm seeing our awesome staff that we consolidated, and these are our rock stars. These are our people that, we'll go to battle with and we'll stand up with. Now I see them in this virtual world and being, a game master in a sense of they've got all of this data, they've got all of these players on their board, and they're overseeing that workforce and still being in control of the decision, being still, moving those chess pieces through that, but at 2x, 3x, 5x speed through the system. And we have it throttled today, which is great because we've got to get the humans to trust that business partner of AI. Soon, as the humans, as we understand it and become more of a partnership with our business FTE, that then we can kind of push the throttle down and see it really go. And now, then you look at a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, maybe a 5 year ROI of that workforce that we didn't have to hire, go outsource, train, take from another organization, put them into a bind, them having to put more cash out because they need that underwriter. So the elevated cost associated with these SMEs. Now you see the scalability at a consistent climb, and your base FT and your GL count stays the same. That's what's exciting, and that's what's happening. And I hope for the audience that they really explore and get on board with this. Um, I was at the TMC conference earlier this year and last year, and you sit around these executive roundtables and you listen to people like, no, we haven't done anything. We're still talking about it, and like, you guys are way past the talking point. I mean, use something simple. Use Copilot. Use something in your coding. Use something in your how you access Teams and Zooms to record use something simple so your workforce gets used to it. Um, I
I have
think
to
I
ask you a
think
question about
I,
that when you go to those conferences, and I know that you are often viewed as a leader at those conferences, and so people come to you for advice and guidance. How do you coach other executives to make sense of this like proliferation of vendors and the fact that some of them only do one thing and they may do it very well, but they're not a true comprehensive solution? How do you sift through who's a pretender and who's real, and how do you qualify a technology partner? I mean, it must be like almost a full-time job just to listen to people trying to
yeah.
sell you stuff.
What I see in a lot of organizations, Henry, is you've got technology, you've got operations, you've got compliance, and they all want their own vendors instead of coming together and saying, okay, what are we solving for? What vendor can scope all of this out so that we use one vendor to control all of these ecosystems? One, it's a lot of business relationships. Oh, my buddy just moved to XYZ company. We need that. Bring them on board. 6 months in, are like, yeah, that didn't work, and now we've got to back out and do something else. Those are nightmare situations. So when I have the opportunity to talk to other executives, other managers, just anybody within different organizations, is, tell me about your culture. Tell me about how you, as an executive team, how you solve problems, and what are you trying to solve for? And do you all participate in talking with these vendors? 9 times out of 10, all I hear is, oh, my technology guy spoke to this guy and they did a demo. Well, did you show your ops and compliance team? No, not yet. We'll get them involved later down the road. 3 or 4 meetings down the road, the ops and compliance team are like, that's not going to work for us. So they spend all of that time and can't solve, and then they got to start all over again. So I really try to understand, without the nice thing about these conferences, Lenders One, TMC, nobody's afraid not to share information. There's no trade secrets that anybody's trying to hide because we're all in the same, we're all in the same problem of taking care of that customer. So giving them information of what we do that we've learned from the hard way just makes them better so that they can become, more efficient. Because at the end of the day, Henry, if we're as efficient as possible, yeah, we may get more business, but that's not driving the cost globally down for that consumer because everybody's still participating in all of these ecosystems. And until all of the data is shared, until everybody's using similar platforms and sharing, either blockchain technology or sharing that data across the board and not having all of these costs associated with credit, AUS, title, flood. If everybody could share that same ecosystem, imagine what our industry would could do. And and so when I'm talking to folks, I just share my best practices. You know, I've learned the hard way of doing things that, but I've also had good mentors in the past. They've shared good information. But talking with folks is what are you solving for and are you communicating with your other leadership partners?
Does capitalism get in the way of cooperation sometimes with all these
Yeah.
vendors?
Yeah, yeah. It's these vendors, they come and go. They get acquired. There's a lot of things happening within the private equity and the VC world with, they come in, blow everything up, and then they exit out 5 years and you're stuck with a contract. Um, the capital is real, and that's where I said earlier is you solve for one problem, now you got to bolt on another business partner at a cost. And now you've got, in my world, you've got all these technology fees all over. And then you try to pass them on to the consumer, or do you have to hold those internally as a cost of business? And that's where that's where the AI today and in the future is going to revolutionize it. It's going to shrink everything and it's going to allow multiple vendors to talk to each other and share information real time. I mean, look at the evolution from an SDK to an API and how quickly that shrunk for the data extraction and sharing of knowledge. And the AI is just going to just propel that delivery of data information to us real time.
I heard a great speaker the other day, and he said, people are afraid of AI for obvious reasons. There's
Yeah.
complexity, dependency, eliminates jobs, but it also provides unprecedented opportunity in human history to allow humans to be human and do what humans do best in the whole world, which is show empathy,
It it
care,
go, it goes
right?
back to relationship. It
Yeah.
goes back to the relationship because it's solving and it's doing all of this work and it allows us to go back and communicate. COVID really hurt globally everything because we stopped communicating with each other and everybody was the keyboard warrior. As humans, we are designed to be around other humans and talk in relationship, and that's how we've evolved, you know, through our lifetimes. The What I see happening, the job elimination piece. Yeah, in certain categories, absolutely, from a redundancy. There's a large lender right now sitting in the Midwest, and they have so much redundancy going on because of the acquisition. They're like, hey, what do we do with all these people? Because it'll be a PR nightmare for them. And job displacement. Are they reteaching these people for different skill sets? But the job elimination is a fear. It's a fear factor. I think if your job is is able to grow with an AI and you don't adopt to it, you're doing that to yourself for a job elimination, in my opinion. If you're not adopting this and not learning this, and you've got other people coming into the industry, like we spoke earlier, you've got somebody sitting out here that's not, technology, but they adopt it. Yeah, we can plug them in and teach them. But the folks that have so many years and they don't want to learn and they don't want to change, that's where those people could be affected in the future, I believe.
So if 3 years is a long time, so I almost hesitate to ask this question. It's kind of the bonus extra credit question we've been asking everybody. But if you
I
if you
didn't I
did go
didn't
to the
I didn't
MBA
study that question.
2029, wherever the heck it's going to
2029.
be, and do we see a dramatically different functional mortgage operation than we see today, or is it maybe just a few more iterations better with AI and automation? Or are we going to see real transformation, do you think?
I don't think it's an if, it is a must question. It is a must now for people to survive within this industry. Um, the digital transformation, in a sense, is it has to occur. It absolutely has to occur. And our legislative bodies have to adopt that change faster than what they're doing that today. Or we're never going to succeed in efficiency, cost reduction, customer satisfaction. We're just going to be on the same hamster wheel over and over again with different shiny objects. And we're going to be saying the same thing. This is what we should have, but we didn't do it. Um, I see the AI revolution as that catalyst to make that real change now because it is happening so fast. People are adopting to it very, very quickly from the vendor aspect of it, from the aspect of the customer wants it because they're interacting with it, real time. So in 2029, I believe we look completely different. I believe we get back more to the business development, that relationship piece. We have all of the big data, blockchain, whatever the new terminology is in the next 3 years. It's going to be a system where you and I, first time home buyer, doesn't matter. They can get on their mobile device. I'll go out on a limb and I think the mobile device disappears. You see all of these wearable devices. We're going to have our own private large language model, doing all of the things that we do as an app on a phone. So that aside, that's going to change where that customer can do everything, real time. The GSEs are going to get on board with it because you're starting to see Freddie and Fannie already push that AI narrative, on the back end. Um, the reps and warrants will be changed. The warehouse banks will adopt. You're going to see a big change in crypto, as it relates to the mortgage world. And I foresee in 3 years, and that's a short window, that we could literally close a loan in less than 10 days. Because if you look at what's happening with AI and the collateral and the appraisal aspect and just the drones, that's exciting and it's creating more and more stuff because the problem that we're starting to see with a lot of these experienced people that we rely on our industry, that young generation is not coming in to those jobs. And so the technology has to intervene and take care of that because it still is a vital process of the workflow. But imagine no more appraisers having to go out to the rural areas. Everything is digitalized. The AI recommends, what you want to do from a collateral, and the GSCs are like, "Yep, we're good with that."
Yeah, absolutely. It's that opportunity is here now, especially in new tract developments. I mean, not every house, right? We have some specialty properties in the United States, but like if you go over to Sweden or something, I was there 10 years ago. They close the loan and turn the keys over before the transaction is actually settled.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're able to do that because so many people live in those flats
Yep. Yep.
that they know exactly what they're worth. And in every parcel is geocoded and digitized. And so when you say I'm buying that flat, there's really
Yep.
not a lot of discrepancy around the collateral. And because they have a social payroll system for the most part, payroll is all online.
Yeah.
So they can get
Well, look.
payroll information, get your credit information, the appraisal is
Yeah.
all done. And so they
Yep.
give you the keys like in 5 days and they settle up the final paperwork after the fact, which I find very, very
Well,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah. And then you also see subdivision tracts being built by AI concrete systems.
Yeah, well, 100%. So I think
So,
we're in
yeah.
that direction, but I wonder if you could provide some nuggets of wisdom for the young folks who are coming into the business around how to. I've had some burgeoning CTO, CIO types that I mentor, and they're like, "Man, I'm overwhelmed, bro. I'm not even gonna lie to you. Like, I have so much to do. I have security infrastructure I have to maintain. I have these core operating systems and the vendors that I have to manage and interact with and maintain a team that can administer this stuff and configure it. And then I've got all my plugins that I'm using for my accounting systems, my compliance systems, my reporting, my data and analytics. And on top of all of that, I have the owner of my company telling me if I don't have something special to show him every quarter related to AI, I'm
Yeah,
going to get
that's a lot of
fired. And
pressure.
so they're really trying to balance their world between like operational security and normalcy, and giving the brand something new and innovative. And so they come to me and they say like, how should I organize my day? Any thoughts about how some of these, maybe new entrants into the business, maybe not so new entrants into the business, should be thinking about their role as a CIO and where they should be spending the bulk of their time, bang for the buck?
Boy, that's a challenging question to answer, because we have so much responsibility than we've ever had before. The CIO today is more in the weeds than more strategic, just because of what we have to do. Even the CTOs and the CISOs. What I would advise is find find those people within your organization that you can plug in the different departments and spread that knowledge. So you've got a digital person who, maybe was sitting on help desk. Plug them into operations so they can be a liaison between your operation and your technology team. Do the same thing for compliance and the same thing for, your InfoSec. If you start creating those layers with the people that can do the job, that you trust, and are reliable and will bring you feedback, then you become that mentor and that advisor that we were really meant to be, versus in the weeds doing all the strategic thinking. I think a lot of folks, when they receive the three-letter title, they think they've got to do everything, and it's just the opposite. You've got to take your knowledge, because you got put in the seat for a reason, right? You've got that experience, and you've got to push that back out to your core people that can work as business development agents. That's a simple term. You're a business development agent. You understand their business. You understand the technology business. Let's see how we can make things more efficient. And now you've got a cross collaboration of communication ecosystem that everybody knows what's going on. Um, and then when the new shiny objects do come in, more people are aware of them. More people understand the benefit, the cost. Is it the right fit for our business today or in the future? The other nugget piece is what I worry about right now is the sophistication of the AI being the bad actor. So put more emphasis on teaching and and coaching your broader scope of employees in the organization, and even extend that ability to teach your customer base, because they're at jeopardy of the bad actors out there. Um, so many people want to be the guy that has all the information. That doesn't work anymore because things are happening so quickly. You've got to be that mentor. You got to be that leader who, embraces the change, asks for feedback, and helps those folks make those decisions. You've got the CEO, the president. You got to show me that stuff. Man, that's kind of a different type of leadership than what you should be using. That CEO or that board, it's like, please tell us, coach us, advise us of what you're seeing, versus I want to see the next shiny object. That's a culture mismatch, because that goes back to efficiency. They're never becoming efficient because they're always chasing the squirrel.
Any coaching around how? Because I agree with you. I think the CIO role, I mean, your chief marketing officer, digital officer, security officer, cutting edge compute officer. You got to know who the vendors are. You've got to know the difference between Claude and Anthropic and ChatGPT, and there's just a lot to learn. How much of your day do you spend just trying to absorb information out there for your own education?
So I keep it really simple. I've got AI bots, scouring, bringing everything into a single intake, and then we have team meetings. 2 or 3 times a week, and I just let them talk. And it's a cross between their knowledge, what they're seeing, and they're sharing information. So it's I kind of already know it. I mean, I know high level stuff. These folks know it, and they're bringing in best practices, real stuff, real things that are happening with other organizations, things within that. So I'm learning from them as much as they are learning from me. And I think that's a big change when you're sitting in a 3-letter seat and you're continuing to learn. Because if you're not learning, then you're not evolving and becoming more efficient to guide the business. But that's how we do it. And we'll have a simple meeting of, hey, this is kind of some nuggets, agenda items, but I want you guys to look at it and dive deeper and share. Um, and then I try to take that to these conferences. Like, well, these are what my folks are telling me, that this is what they're seeing. What are you guys seeing? And again, it's sharing knowledge and best practices. And unfortunately, it happens today. People don't want to share, and that is a cancer within an organization, I believe.
Yeah, great. That's fantastic. And I would say that at some point we're going to do a follow-up series here, and I would love to have you be there. I think that, to your point, there's not enough collaboration amongst peers who have a three-letter title. And I think part of its competitive advantage, I'm not going to tell you something that's I think is going to give me. There's always this immediate translation to zero sum. I got to be better, faster, cheaper than you. And if I tell you I'm not going to be, which I think is ridiculous because no one is, everybody's
Yeah.
in the middle of the bell curve. And then there's a second thing, this fear of like imposter syndrome. The truth is, it is happening really fast. And I don't have a lot of people inside my organization that can do what you just said, which is to inform me. I'm behind the curve, and I'm seeing more and more folks who are well respected in the industry. If they were honest, they would tell you they have a deficit when it comes to really what's happening and what's emerging. And instead of reaching out and being vulnerable and saying, "Hey, I got a blind spot here. Is anybody can coach me up?" Everybody's the expert, right? Or based on the last. And how do we break those barriers down as an industry so the C-suite guys get in a room and really open up and
Yeah.
and
That
share
that's their
best practice?
ego. That's their ego and their vanity getting in the way. Like, hey, I got to be the smartest room person in the room. And and to your point, Henry, that's why you're seeing, a lot of folks like ourselves, we set up our own committees. We find people that are like-minded and are willing to share, and we gravitate to these meetings and show best practices. Um, because why not? Why not share best practices with people that you're in the same, foxhole with? But the vanity and the ego get in a way of a lot of three letter titles for sure.
So I'm gonna wrap us up with one last question, if I could, and that is, and it's a bit self-serving, but there's a lot of coaching that comes with this question. If uh, our partners are on this call with us today and helping to produce this show, get the opportunity to visit a CIO and make a presentation about their technical compute capabilities to support as a supplier, coding, integrating, building, deploying, administering, all the suite of services that a developer SI firm. Who's the decision maker inside of an organization now on spend related to IT, number one? And then number two, as it relates to an independent mortgage banker, what topics are going to be relevant to the CIO? So first question is, who should they even try to get a meeting with? Maybe it's not the CIO. Maybe they should be trying to get a meeting. The purse strings are held by marketing or finance or the CEO. That's always one question. And then when they get the meeting, what are the two or three most germane topics that are going to catch somebody's eye and say, I think I want to pay for a partner. I think I need help. I think I'm willing to pay for help. Or these are projects I know I need help with, so that your presentation is focused.
Yeah.
And the reason I ask the question is, um, we're struggling to find, what are those themes that are universal these in 2026 that people truly
Yeah.
need help with. So question number one is, if you were a software development company or a technical services company, a vendor, Who are you trying to get in front of within the firm? Most important person to get in front of.
Well, one, they're bombarding people on LinkedIn because they see a title. And so they're like pinging them, hey, set up a meeting, and then you dump them into a CRM system and they're just blasting emails to everybody because it's like an octopus. They're trying to, find that one person. I would start at that mid to low level, that manager, that VP. If you can see an org chart and you see all the folks in there, start there. Especially with an IMB, start with a salesperson, a loan officer, because we look at our sales team as problem solvers. So if they bring an idea, we're going to kind of look at it because we want to support them. So that's a good avenue to do. That question of who's holding the purse strings, that's dependent on the IMB. It could be a one or two owner and you go right to the top, or you've got a layered ecosystem where you've got all these different budgets, and depending on what you're solving for, you've got to start in there. But involving the CFO, they're going to look at cost, and so you got to involve them. But get to that mid-level person. Like I said, because I rely on my team, for the feedback and stuff. And so imagine, they just talked with that group, and they're like, "Hey, we'd like Michael to sit on the clock." Like, you know what, Scott? You know what, Wyatt? Matt, if you want me to sit in there with them, I'll be more than happy to do that because you're basically getting an internal referral, right?
Okay.
From your own
Interesting.
folks.
Yeah.
Start there. Um, and then the second thing is once you're in there is like, can I see your project list? Can I see what you guys have on the whiteboard, what you're trying to solve for, and the timelines that you think you can complete it, and then what's holding that back? Imagine coming into an internal referral, right? And now they've shared with you, maybe you have to sign an NDA, that's fine, but they share you that project workload over the next 18 to 24 months. And now they come in like, man, we'd like to talk to you about this, this, and this, and then have a demonstration of like real world to your business versus just these general demos of how we can, do better for you. So
Right.
that's what I would start with.
Super helpful. You're the first person that said that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, man, I have appreciated the time. I want to be mindful of your time. This has been
Oh yeah.
fantastic. Like I said, these guys are going to kind of rip and cleanse and organize and sort and package this stuff into
Can
some
they
vignettes.
polish and blemish and all that stuff?
Oh man, you're too good looking already. They might have
All
to
of
do
our
that to make
sun-dried
you more
skin.
relatable. They might have to put a little wart on the top of your head or something.
Oh yes, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, big things sticking out of my neck, something like that. Yeah.